Grains, particularly whole grains, are actually anti-inflammatory, contrary to a lot of popular beliefs and myths out there. Hey, everybody, I thought I would chat with you guys and gals a little bit about this today. Again, this is an area that has had to be studied, and people need to keep in mind there was a lot of misconception on some of this stuff about 20 years ago. There were some hypotheses regarding grains and inflammation, a lot of fringe stuff. And the reality is, when the data has been looked at closely, stuff has been measured. We've even looked at history, look at demographics. We kind of see that grains are oftentimes tend to be anti-inflammatory. Now, before I go further into that a little bit, we do need to keep in mind the whole concept of foods being inflammatory versus anti-inflammatory. It is about a balance, because people need to keep in mind that a lot of foods you eat do both, right? In other words, there's a whole cascade of effects in your body when we eat different foods. And most foods that you eat, with obviously a lot of exceptions, but it's very common for foods to have multiple ingredients that are both inflammatory and anti-inflammatory. And by ingredients, I don't mean stuff we've mixed together. I mean what is there found naturally in those food matrices. And even the way that we prepare those foods, cook those foods, things like that can absolutely impact a lot of that. So keep in mind, you might have 6 different things that cause some inflammation and 6 different things that are anti-inflammatory in an individual whole food as it's found already. Okay, so we do need a context for that. So when someone says, yeah, but this grain might have this in it and that's inflammatory, but we're looking at the net effect, right? When all the effects are done in the body, are you going to see more or less total inflammation in the body as a result of eating this? Okay, so that's kind of what we're looking at, not looking at all, the individual constituents in there. So that's kind of our context. So one of the things to think about up front, though, a lot of the old myths about it had to do with the idea that omega-6 fats were pro-inflammatory in humans. Okay, and the reality is, like everything else, I always say, you can't just take the word fat and go, fats do this, fats do that, because there's different types of fats. And even inside of say, polyunsaturated fats, and specifically omega-6 fats, there's multiple fats in that category. Okay, multiple different fats that are chemically different substances that still fall under that category, under that subset of fats. So one of the things that was noted is that we know that arachidonic acid, which is an omega-6, can be converted from linoleic acid. And we know that arachidonic acid is inflammatory in the human body. Its net effect is inflammatory. The problem is that in nature, it's not actually found in any plants, particularly grains. It's not found at all. It's only found in certain animals, right? In certain animal fats. So it's not even something you find in plants, but it is something that the human body, as you would expect, given that we are biologically animals, are capable of making it. Okay, just like the animals that have it in their system, is in their fat matrix, they make it from plants, right? That's where they're getting it from. They're making it. So accordingly, the whole idea here as well, so we must be converting it. We have the potential to convert it. Well, it turns out that potential is relatively low. Now, as far as the ability to raise it goes, that's a little bit of a complicated topic. As far as different people's diet composition giving them the ability to convert it at a higher rate, that's a extremely complicated topic. But setting that nuance aside, generally speaking, what we find is that the conversion rate of it is relatively low. And when you take something like linoleic acid, it's actually anti-inflammatory. Okay, so that's where it gets really tricky. Okay, so we have a fat that is anti-inflammatory that our body will convert a small amount of into an inflammatory fat. Now, this is where it gets complicated. All right, so the speculation was that this is going to be inflammatory. Well, what's actually been measured is that generally speaking, the anti-inflammatory nature of the LA is strong enough to offset the inflammatory nature of the arachidonic acid. The net result is that inflammation goes down just slightly when we consume plant source omega-6 fats. It's not a massive difference. It's a very small positive net effect in regards to overall inflammation. Okay? Now, that being said, almost a moot point when it comes to grains because most grains are very, very low in this. I mean, they have it, but realistically speaking, I mean, most of us are not getting 20 or 30 grams of polyunsaturated fats from grains. Okay? In other words, eating 2,000 calories of brown rice or 2,000 calories of oats or even 2,000 calories of wheat is not going to give you those levels. And keeping in mind, that's still not a super high level. Yes, you are getting polyunsaturated fats from it. It's not large amounts. It's not like, let's say if you ate some peanuts, okay? You would have to eat huge amounts of grains for that to occur, to be even close to the equivalent. So all of that being said, what you start finding is that when they then measure it, so we set aside that hypothesis has been kind of debunked when it's been studied more closely, okay? But when we start looking then at grains themselves, okay, we could make arguments for white rice potentially is a little different due to the faster absorption, loss of some of the nutrients, maybe white flour, okay. But they're not really particularly inflammatory, all things considered. But when we start looking into whole grains, we find it is the opposite. Whole grains tend to be anti-inflammatory. So in other words, if we eat brown rice, we eat whole oats, we eat quinoa, whatever, barley, what we find is that with whole grains, even whole wheat, they're mildly anti-inflammatory due to all the phytonutrients, potential antioxidants, other stuff. When it's all measured, they seem to actually be slightly anti-inflammatory as a whole. Okay, so again, when we look at it from that perspective, they're technically anti-inflammatory foods, but it's very mild. They're not as strongly anti-inflammatory as something like fruits and vegetables. Okay, not so much, or even like tubers and root vegetables and things. I mean, a sweet potato or a watermelon is going to be far more anti-inflammatory than whole grains are. But they're still anti-inflammatory foods, and they're certainly not contributing to overall inflammation in the body. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys and gals next time.